Hey everyone, welcome back to Z Tech Advisor. Today, we're exploring compliance, auditing, and regulatory considerations in the tech world. In Module 10, we'll delve into the importance of data processing compliance and its impact on business operations. We'll also discuss the crucial role of auditing in ensuring adherence to standards and regulations. Lastly, we'll highlight the significance of staying informed about regulatory requirements to avoid potential risks and liabilities. Let's dive in and uncover the essentials of compliance, auditing, and regulatory considerations. Module 10: Compliance, Auditing, and Regulatory Considerations. Overview of regulatory requirements related to vulnerability management, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, etc. Understanding compliance frameworks and standards relevant to vulnerability. Role of vulnerability management in passing compliance audits. Establishing and maintaining compliance with vulnerability management requirements. Common compliance pitfalls and how to avoid them. Auditing vulnerability management processes and controls. Leveraging compliance as a driver for continuous improvement in vulnerability management. Case studies highlighting the intersection of compliance and vulnerability management. Overview of regulatory requirements related to vulnerability management, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, etc. Understanding regulatory requirements related to vulnerability management is essential for organizations operating in regulated industries. Regulations such as GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, impose specific obligations on organizations to protect sensitive data and mitigate security risks. Compliance with these regulations requires organizations to implement robust vulnerability management processes to identify, assess, and remediate security vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or non-compliance penalties. By familiarizing themselves with regulatory requirements, organizations can ensure they are meeting their legal obligations and safeguarding sensitive information. Understanding compliance frameworks and standards relevant to vulnerability management. Compliance frameworks and standards provide guidelines and best practices for implementing effective vulnerability management processes. Frameworks such as NIST Cybersecurity Framework, ISO/IEC 27001, and CIS controls offer comprehensive frameworks for managing cybersecurity risks, including vulnerability management. These frameworks outline key principles, controls, and recommendations for identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and remediating security vulnerabilities. By aligning with recognized compliance frameworks and standards, organizations can establish a solid foundation for their vulnerability management programs and demonstrate compliance with industry best practices and regulatory requirements. Role of vulnerability management in passing compliance audits. Vulnerability management plays a critical role in passing compliance audits by demonstrating an organization's commitment to identifying and addressing security vulnerabilities in a timely manner. During compliance audits, auditors assess the effectiveness of an organization's vulnerability management processes, controls, and practices in mitigating security risks and protecting sensitive data. By implementing robust vulnerability management processes and documenting compliance efforts, organizations can provide auditors with evidence of their compliance with regulatory requirements and industry standards. Effective vulnerability management not only helps organizations achieve compliance but also enhances their overall security posture and reduces the risk of data breaches and non-compliance penalties. Establishing and maintaining compliance with vulnerability management requirements. Establishing and maintaining compliance with vulnerability management requirements involves implementing a systematic approach to identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and remediating security vulnerabilities. This includes establishing policies, procedures, and controls for vulnerability management, assigning roles and responsibilities, and conducting regular vulnerability assessments and scans. Organizations must also ensure they have mechanisms in place to track and report on vulnerabilities, remediation efforts, and compliance status. By continuously monitoring and updating their vulnerability management processes and controls, organizations can adapt to changing regulatory requirements and emerging threats while maintaining compliance with industry standards. Common compliance pitfalls and how to avoid them. Common compliance pitfalls include failing to conduct regular vulnerability assessments, overlooking critical vulnerabilities, and neglecting to document compliance efforts adequately. To avoid these pitfalls, organizations should prioritize vulnerability management as a strategic priority and allocate resources accordingly. They should also establish clear policies, procedures, and controls for vulnerability management and ensure they are consistently followed across the organization. Regular training and awareness programs can help educate employees about their roles and responsibilities in maintaining compliance with vulnerability management requirements. Auditing vulnerability management processes and controls. Auditing vulnerability management processes and controls involves conducting periodic assessments to evaluate the effectiveness of an organization's vulnerability management program. Auditors examine the organization's policies, procedures, and controls for identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and remediating security vulnerabilities. They also review documentation, reports, and evidence of compliance with regulatory requirements and industry standards. By auditing vulnerability management processes and controls, organizations can identify weaknesses, gaps, and areas for improvement in their vulnerability management programs and take corrective actions to enhance their effectiveness and compliance. Leveraging compliance as a driver for continuous improvement in vulnerability management. Leveraging compliance as a driver for continuous improvement in vulnerability management involves using compliance requirements as a catalyst for enhancing vulnerability management processes and practices. By aligning with regulatory requirements and industry standards, organizations can establish a baseline for their vulnerability management programs and identify areas for improvement. They can then use compliance audits and assessments as opportunities to evaluate their vulnerability management efforts, identify weaknesses, and implement corrective actions to strengthen their security posture. By integrating compliance into their overall risk management strategy, organizations can leverage compliance requirements as a roadmap for continuous improvement in vulnerability management. Case studies highlighting the intersection of compliance and vulnerability management. Case studies highlighting the intersection of compliance and vulnerability management provide real-world examples of how organizations have successfully navigated compliance requirements while enhancing their vulnerability management practices. These case studies demonstrate the importance of integrating compliance into vulnerability management processes and leveraging compliance as a driver for continuous improvement. They also showcase best practices, lessons learned, and key takeaways for organizations seeking to enhance their vulnerability management programs and achieve compliance with regulatory requirements and industry standards. By analyzing case studies, organizations can gain insights into effective strategies for managing compliance and vulnerability management in tandem.